Disclaimer: this podcast is for informational purposes only. It is not intended to provide medical advice. It exists only to entertain.
Poor historians, poor historians. We look at cases throughout history. It's just Max in there and Mike and me. You gotta listen, you don't have to read. Poor historians, poor historians, poor historians.
Welcome to this week's episode of the Poor Historians podcast, where we are bringing you another M&M episode. That's museums and medicine, not the candy or the morbidity and mortality conferences that doctors in training learn to dread. This week, we'll be talking to Kim Jovinelli. She is the director of the Lancaster Medical Heritage Museum in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, here in the U.S. She wears multiple hats there, including curator, librarian, exhibition designer, and archivist, marketing and public relations person, and, of course, TikTok star of the medical history world. Her undergraduate studies focused on archaeology and anthropology, and she went on to get a master's degree in museum communication. And despite the Lancaster Medical Heritage Museum being in the midst of moving to a whole new location with a soon-to-occur public unveiling in the beginning of December, she was kind enough to take time out of her day to talk with us. Oh, and I forgot to mention, she's a pro wrestling fan, so that automatically makes her among my favorite people in the medical historian universe. Our conversation visited several interesting medical history tidbits. Have you ever heard of a vaccine farm? Well, we're going to talk about it. What is polio and why did we need iron lungs? Well, we'll get into this a bit more as well, especially the important physiological concepts such as what happens if you pass gas in one of those devices. Are there reasons to still do bloodletting in the 21st century? And yes, we're going to talk about that too. And why would you bury someone in honey and then eat them? It's a good question. So might as well hash it out. But we'll have all of this and more, so stay tuned and let's jump to the interview. We are joined here today by Kim Jovinelli from the Lancaster Medical Heritage Museum. Kim, how are you today?
I am fantastic, and I'm very impressed you got my name right.
I was going to ask.
When you said it, I was like, you might have asked first.
No, you got it.
Italian last name? Am I
Italian
correct
last
there?
name. Mm-hmm.
So I was one of those kids who had to take the weird language in high school, not something that was going to be more practical. So I took Italian for, 3 or 4 years in high school. So
did
I
you
don't
really
remember any actually Italian? No, I did. But I did remember the pronunciations. And so sometimes I get it right.
Well, there
we
you
are
go.
Off to a swimming start. And I appreciate it because you were just telling us that you've had a pretty busy week. You're taking some time out to talk with us. And That is really cool. Thank you so much.
Oh, no problem. It's a nice change of pace. Like I said, I'm a headless chicken this week. So it's nice to sit for
seeing
an
on
hour
video,
or so.
I can see that your head is firmly attached, even if it doesn't feel that way.
Yes.
So we're here to basically talk about your museum, the Lancaster Medical Heritage Museum, located in the state of Pennsylvania. Am I? It's not England.
No,
correct?
No, not Lancaster, England.
I figured the accent.
And
didn't seem
you have to
fit
pronounce it correctly because
would it be Lancashire?
We get in trouble because I had to learn it when I moved here. It's Lancaster.
Lancaster?
Yeah, Lancaster.
It
sounds like a pastry or something
doesn't
anatomical. It? Yeah.
Yes. But yes, it's Lancaster, Lancaster, however you want to say it. It's Medical Heritage Museum.
Lancaster. All right.
Lancaster. And that's how you say the Pennsylvania Lancaster.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. It's like Oregon. Like Oregon is not Oregon, it's Oregon.
Oregon.
Yes,
yeah.
if you say Oregon, people in Oregon
they know that you've never been there.
That you're an outsider.
Although there is an Oregon, Wisconsin.
And
if you go to Oregon, Wisconsin, and you say Oregon, they're going to say, what? And so it all depends. It's all local.
Geography. What's the capital of Luxembourg, Max?
Wait, what?
I've been
there.
And Luxembourg, yeah. So let's start by having you tell us a little bit about the museum there and kind of your role. What do you do at the museum there?
Well, I'm kind of an everything person at the moment. my official title is executive director, so I kind of run the museum right now. We're in the process of opening our very first public-facing museum. We were in a business park, which was behind security gates and kind of hidden among other businesses, with no signage really. So this is going to be our first public-facing museum, and we were really lucky that we have Lancaster General Hospital here in Lancaster provided us the space to be able to do this. So shout out to LGH.
Happy to.
I don't even think we had a sign on the street saying we were there. It was pretty much a if you knew, you knew kind of thing, which most people didn't know. So
You've got the when does the public unveiling go forward?
we're going to be opening in early December.
Yeah, everything's all in row. You're just relaxing for the next 2 months. You've already got everything taken care
dude, I
of. And open the
wish.
doors.
I wish, dude.
Could you go and see the
No.
collection then? Was this something that if you knew about it, you could go and look at things, or was
Yeah,
it just
we
kind of
were-
like a storage space?
No, we were in a storage space, but it did have a like a very small, maybe 500 square feet space where there were displays. They're very small displays. This was before I started. I started just after COVID, and they were already packing up because we knew we were moving. So everything was kind of already. I never saw it in situ per se. So, but that's what I understand, and it was by appointment only. So for the most part.
Yeah, because looking at your website, you have a huge collection of stuff. So
Yeah,
it'll be nice to have it all out in the
objects.
open.
Yeah,
Seems like a lot of objects.
that's a lot,
Yeah,
and
I
they're
don't have much
very
Hoping that we can
scale.
actually discuss each one by one.
Yeah.
You guys have some water and coffee and ready to go here?
a lot.
When you move that many things from a museum, how much gets lost? Like you get to say it's lost in the move. I lost this skeleton. It was around here. It must be in a box somewhere. I'm sure we'll find it
Where
10
did
years
that
from now. I mean,
pesky
does that happen?
skeleton go?
You laugh, but we had that problem with skulls, particularly.
Ooh,
I was told when I started that there were human skulls in the collection somewhere, but they weren't really sure where. So as we were packing up at the business park, I'm going through boxes to try and familiarize myself with the collection because I was new. I didn't know what I was looking at.
Sure.
And opened the box, and there they are, just staring at me. So we found them.
Nice. Cue the spooky Indiana Jones music underneath. Like,
Mhm.
how did they get
Yeah.
there? Where did they go?
What do you pack a skull in? Bubble wrap?
Yeah, pretty much. Newspaper, bubble wrap. We use ethafoam mostly, which is like polyurethane. So it doesn't degrade. So
Oh, I thought it was ethically sourced foam.
maybe, I don't know. I don't ask
Cage
questions.
free. Yeah.
It just shows up at the door.
Comes from foam trees. You harvest the trees and you replant them. And so Kim, how did you get interested in medical history? Is it something you always enjoyed or something you sort of fell into along the way?
Well, I like to describe myself as Gothic light. I've always been interested in
Nice.
the macabre side of history, the darker side of history. And when you get into the darker side of history, it's a lot of medical history. So
Mm-hmm.
Yep,
that's kind of
we're
how I
good for that.
shoehorned into that. But my background is actually in archaeology is where I started. I was working with Independence National Historic Park, which is where the Liberty Bell is in Philadelphia, in their archaeology department. Oddly enough, also a lot of medical equipment. So it just always followed me around. But yeah.
Kind of
like
like
the-
the skulls that, yeah.
Mhm. Did that always
Open
follow
the
you
skull
around?
box and
There's
you're
actually
like,
one behind you right now. Yeah.
If you see my office, I have about 9 in here. So they're not real.
Well, if you're
I'm
not,
jealous.
Mhm.
you do archaeology, isn't that an occupational risk? I mean, there's curses and stuff every time you.
It's always
things
an
out, right?
archaeologist that
Yeah.
starts some weird curse
Yep.
that takes out
Yep,
the
yep.
world. So-
I read something about King Tut's curse, and it turns out like somebody looked at it. I'm sure there are many books written about it, but the number of people that died after going into the tomb was less than the overall mortality rate of the population at the time. So it's actually better. You're better off going in.
yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you advocating for tomb raiding?
It
Yes.
sounds like he is.
Yeah, and distribute the artifacts across the globe.
They
Mainly to
belong
the
in a
UK and
museum?
America.
Everybody knows
Yeah.
that.
As a museum professional, I plead the fifth.
Yeah.
Well done. This will not be used as evidence at any point in the future. Is there a founding story for the museum? How did this museum come together? A couple of docs or historians had a couple of drinks, or?
I'm sure that's how it happened, but it was a little bit before my time. It started in 1982. There's an organization in Lancaster called the City and County Medical Society, and they got together one day and decided they wanted to open a museum. So they founded in 1982 the Edward Hand Medical Heritage Foundation. Edward Hand is a kind of a famous character in Lancaster. He was the first physician here. He was a general in George Washington's army during the Revolution. He was involved in the Battle of Yorktown. So he was kind of a big deal. The problem is that we don't really have any artifacts of his in the collection.
Oh.
Actually, we have none. So there was really no point in us being named the Edward Hand Medical Heritage Foundation when nobody really knew about him.
He existed. Trust us. We just don't have proof.
Yeah, exactly.
When did he drop his middle name, Scissors?
God,
Nice.
Mike.
What?
That was
I've
excellent.
seen his movie. It was really good. Yeah.
Yeah, that was
Tim
really
Burton
good.
classic.
I'm not mad at you for
That's
making
right.
the joke. I'm mad at you for making the joke, and I didn't think of it.
Yeah. You did
That
it? The
was-
second I heard the name, I was like, oh, there you go.
I know. Mm.
I didn't even put two and two together until like this very moment. So,
Yeah, cool.
but yeah, it started out as the Edward Hand Foundation, and then we changed our name to the Lancaster Medical Heritage Foundation Museum in 2020. So, just as the pandemic hit, we changed our name.
It's a good time
Wow.
to start a new enterprise,
I think so.
Perfect. Especially a public one, yeah.
Yeah, we can kind of hide out under the radar and just spring forth like, here we are.
Yeah. You could have named it like, come in, you won't get COVID here, museum. Trust us, it's fine. Don't worry about it.
I mean,
.com.
like, other diseases here, but not
Yeah.
COVID.
Well, I think you kind of alluded to it a little bit, but are there any particularly notable medical history events that took place in Lancaster?
Lancaster.
Pennsylvania?
Lancaster.
There we go. Any notable big events there?
Well, like I said about Edward Hand, he was pretty big, but I think the biggest one in Lancaster is the Marietta vaccine farm was here, which during the I want to say the mid to late 19th century, a gentleman named Dr. Alexander, H.M. Alexander, started a vaccine farm here to kind of build on Edward Jenner's smallpox vaccine and try and get it more widely distributed.
Where do you get the vaccine seeds, though?
Well, it's not a seed.
What's a vaccine
The
farm?
vaccine
Isn't that
farm,
what
I
It's
mean.
not a vaccine tree.
Plant some
No.
vaccine seeds, and you get little vials out of the ground.
For this one, how it started was cowpox and smallpox. I mean, you guys would know better than me. I'm not a doctor, but cowpox and smallpox are on like the similar branch of that vaccine tree or that disease tree.
Mm.
So,
Similar brands.
Yeah. So Jenner discovered, and correct, I'm sure somebody's going to tell me I'm wrong. Jenner discovered the smallpox vaccine by using cowpox.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
using
no, that sounds right.
Yeah,
That's
using the pustules from cowpox to create the smallpox vaccine. So originally, what they would do is cut your arm and cut somebody who's got the smallpox, their arm,
Sure.
and just kind of mix your blood together. But
Hygienic.
obviously, there was a lot more problems when it came to that. I mean, especially with other
Yes.
diseases, specifically syphilis was a problem during the time. So
That would have been like the one time where you are diagnosed with an STI and you could reasonably plead that it may not have been from.
Like, but dear, I
Sexual
just got the
contact.
smallpox vaccine. That's what it's from. That's what it's
swear.
from. I swear.
Philadelphia is the city of blood brotherly love.
I
We're all
guess.
blood brothers, yeah.
A race. Yeah, don't Don't share all those bodily fluids.
No.
There are better ways to get vaccines, I agree. But you're right. So smallpox and cowpox, the viruses are similar, but similar enough. However, they affect both species very differently. And so people, to my recollection, don't really have much of an illness from cowpox. But if they're exposed to it, they mount the type of antibodies that should block the actual smallpox. So it's sort of a nice coincidence that those two viruses it stimulate our immune systems in a similar way.
Right. And actually, one of the stories we came across when we were researching smallpox, one of our interns, now my employee, Megan, she did an entire research on Edward Jenner and the smallpox vaccine and the Marietta farm. But one of the things that people did to try and combat smallpox was, I mean, like injecting mercury directly into your veins, and I forget the guy's name, but that was his big claim to fame, even though it never really came of anything. But it just kind of made him really, really sick. But
but he didn't care about having smallpox anymore.
Yeah, it ultimately treats
exactly,
it. Yeah,
exactly. But yeah, the vaccine farm was here, and then H.M. Alexander discovered a way to make it safer by mixing it with, I think, glycerin or glucose. I'm not sure which one it was. It begins with a G. But he made it safer and more easily accessible. So rather than mixing blood, they would put the virus on these little ivory points. I don't think they were actually made of ivory, but they called them ivory points, I think, because of the color. And they look like little arrowheads, and they would just kind of like ... on your arm to give you the vaccine. And I think within 5 years of the opening of the Marietta vaccine farm, they were shipping worldwide to China, South America. So, I mean, we were at one point the largest distributor of vaccines in the world. At one
That's
point.
a reasonable claim to fame. I looked into it. I saw this mention. So I read about this recently, the Marietta vaccine farm, and what he would do is he started with like one cow, and then eventually had hundreds of cows. He would infect them with smallpox, is what it said, and then he would take their blood where the antibodies would be, and then use that, as you said, to inoculate people. But he would just keep reinfecting cows, and the cows didn't get really sick, but they would make the antibodies, and then he could take that. And I believe the first year he was in operation, he made $1.50 of profit. And then, as you said, within about 5 years, he was like the world supplier. And so I'm assuming he did reasonably well for himself.
Yeah, I'd say so. But he was also one of like the cleaner vaccine farms too. So like one of his claims to fame was that he was like the clean one. I mean,
the clean cow blood. Yes.
Yeah. It was the animals were treated more ethically. They weren't covered in filth. They were eating well. Like that was kind of why people really trusted him, I believe.
Oh, that's really cool. All right, well, let's move to the museum's collections. I think, I don't remember who said it before, but 14,000 objects, and probably and counting, I imagine.
And counting, yes, 14,000. Our scope of collection kind of is pretty far-ranging. We go from teeny tiny medical instruments that I'm sure you guys are way more familiar with than I am, to the iron lung,
the grabby things and the pokey things and the slicey things.
And the
and I'm finding new things every day and learning new things every day. So it's been fun. But yeah, we go from little teeny tiny grabby pokey things to the iron lung, which is like 3,000 pounds. So
I'm excited to talk about the iron lung. And we're going to here momentarily, but one thing we asked one of our previous guests is, what's one of the more unusual items that somebody has tried to donate to the museum, and either it's been accepted or it just wasn't a good fit? Has there been some sort of strange object that you never thought you would see that has come across? Either it's still in the collection now, or it was like, it's not really for our museum. Anything weird like that?
Well, I will tell you what my favorite object in this museum is, and it's really weird. It's called an artificial leech, but its official name is Lebenswecker, and I'm probably destroying that. It's a German name. It means life giver. But when I came across it in our collection, it just looked like a magic wand out of Harry Potter. It's this mahogany, it almost looks like a magic wand. But what it is, and it took us kind of breaking it apart, and that's not what we did. We discovered like, oh, the bottom turns, and we unscrewed the bottom, and there's all these like points, like sharp pointy things.
Needles or
needles, yes.
Needles or nails or something in the end.
Yes. And it's it was used with some sort of like irritating toxin, and it's spring loaded.
Okay.
So the very top of it you would kind of pull the spring back and let it go, and it would pierce the skin, and it would make it
substance.
Yeah, with the toxic substance. So you would get like this really bad itchy rash, and it would make you forget whatever illness you had. So that was kind of the thought behind it. Which is, it was like a whole theory of thought. Like,
Aaron, are you looking at? Are you?
Yeah, no, I'm taking a picture of this. It's crazy. It looks really nice on the outside. It's got like a nice sort of cap, and it's all wooden, and then it opens up to this sort of angry nest of little spikes. It's so rude. Ugh.
I like the fact that basically what this gentleman did was he's like, I'll put some spikes on the end of a stick, and I'm going to call it the Life Awakener.
Yeah,
that hubris is amazing. I mean, you put nails in the end of a stick, and I know there's a little bit more to it as you described, but this is a stick full of nails that you poke people with. Life Awakener just seems extremely dramatic for that.
I think it's a little bit of a stretch.
It reminds me of, I don't know if you guys remember the movie Major Pain with Damon Wayans.
Oh, absolutely.
From like the 90s. In the very beginning of that movie, the guy has like, he's missing a leg, and he's like, I can fix you. And he just breaks his pinky. Like, there, you forget about it. That's kind of like, it's kind of the idea behind it.
There is some medical principle here. I'm not advocating for stabbing people through toxic burny substances, but there are some medicines that we use, like a topical cream called capsaicin cream, which is basically a pepper extract cream, which you can get it all over the counter. And so some folks who have neuropathy, which is a really painful nerve condition that typically affects folks with like diabetes, where the disease over time damages the nerves, often in the feet and then the hands and whatnot, where you can't feel things, or things are very painful when they really shouldn't be. The capsaicin cream, the thought is it basically sits on the skin, it irritates the skin nerves because it's like concentrated pepper cream, and then the other deeper nerves no longer are carrying so many signals, so it can alleviate the neuropathic pain. Clove oil similar to be used on the gums, so there's something there, just not the stabbing people through the burny substance. That's just a bit much and unnecessary.
I wonder if it's like cupping.
Oh yeah, we have cupping tools here too. A lot of blood.
I mean, if you're gonna make me pick between the stabby one or the suction cup,
I would go for cupping.
The suction cup.
Well, cupping came back, right? You saw it on a bunch of Olympic athletes and such. They would have these perfectly circumscribed bruises and such. That had to be cupping. So it's,
why was it spring loaded? Why wouldn't you just like poke? Like the mechanism is unnecessary.
Diabetes lancets are spring loaded, so it's just a quick, in and out. But I mean, you don't want. I mean, you gonna come at them with a hammer and start tapping that thing in?
These are like deck screws. These are huge. There's about 20 of them. So they're all rusty.
Yeah, but if you have the spring and you can hide them in the device and be like, "Hey, what's that?" Bang, you get it done. And I feel like that's part of the design, right? So, Kim, they would use this for bloodletting. Is that right?
This not particularly for bloodletting. It was probably used for that at some point, but mostly to kind of take your mind off whatever illness you had. Of course, it had, it was billed as kind of like a quack medical device as well. So it could cure baldness, it could cure whooping cough, it could cure.
How do they hit you with it if you're bald? Is they just right on the head, or like stabbing your leg? Like, who cares if you're? I mean,
it looks like some of these are saying the original claim was they would make blisters and that would suck the bad stuff out of your body when the blisters drained. So I'm sure there was. Yeah, there's a whole theory behind it.
Well, I'm always I love, even if this device wasn't specifically designed for bloodletting, if I saw correctly on your website, you guys have some of those little boxes, right? The spring-loaded
bloodletting, yeah.
Those are creepy as heck.
Those are amazing, because I see those, and the first thing that jumps to my mind, these, and just if listener has not seen these before, these are like ornate, small gold or bronze-looking boxes, right, with hidden wheels or razors inside where they shoot out and basically cut your arm in a couple different places or wherever you put it. I'm sure it would cut. And the idea there to make blood run from multiple wounds and, in the act of bloodletting. But you can't look at that box and not think that's the box from Hellraiser, the Lament configuration, which in fairness pretty much had a similar goal, just, with the multidimensional universe and calling through the Cenobites and that sort of thing, just like they did back in the old times of medicine.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I mean, bloodletting has been around. I mean, fairly recently we stopped doing it. So, it had an odd science behind it. So I'm sure you guys have heard of the 4 humors of the body.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you had black bile, yellow bile, phlegm, and blood. So
I have a phlegmy disposition today.
Each kind of, helped different things. And bloodletting was like we got to balance out the fluids in your body. So that's kind of the idea behind it.
Now, my favorite thing is there are actually still a few indications for bloodletting in a little bit more of a, I guess, scientific or controlled sense. So there's a few times and you actually do, I guess you can call it therapeutic phlebotomy, removing blood. Mm-hmm. One of the conditions is something called hemochromatosis, which is a sort of genetic condition where your liver starts to build up all these iron stores, and they build up in the liver. They cause problems with the tissue of the liver. And so the way that you help this, because iron is a big ingredient in how you make blood, is that you bloodlet. You take out a bunch of blood for no reason other than to make the body use up all those iron stores and keep them at a more controlled level. So that's like one indication. They also, you can do it this is like if you are back against the wall, you do not have a lot of modern resources. If you have a patient who's on dialysis and they are way fluid overloaded, their kidneys, can't get rid of fluid. If they're super fluid overloaded and you cannot get them dialysis immediately, you can actually empty out a bunch of pints of blood to try to get rid of some fluid. And that is technically not your first move, but it is a move you can do, and something that when I learn these things that are not things I ever have to do in an emergency department, they never go away. And I think they replace childhood memories. So this is what I remember, but I don't remember.
I don't remember that one. The
hemochromatosis, deep dive.
So like with hemochromatosis, would you have to do that more than once? Is that like an often thing?
Yeah, like a lifetime.
Yeah, you go back, I can't remember how often, but like I think once a month or once every couple of months, maybe. I'm sure there are other treatments nowadays for it. Not a usual thing that comes into the emergency department, mind you, but it's like you have to learn about a lot of esoteric diseases that you don't actually ever see.
Although I did see this, and a guy was like, "Hey, listen, I just want to let you know my counts are going to be up. I haven't been bloodlet in a while." I can't remember how he put it. Yeah, I think he said phlebotomy.
Lies, really?
Yeah. His counts were up. Yeah.
Okay.
And then the nurses drew blood because we draw 10 vials, just screening vials. He's like, "Well, I think I'm going to be fine now. Look at all that blood." All the nurses listening.
They love to make that joke.
Oh, they love it.
How much you going to take? You're going to take all of it? And you're like, no, this is a normal amount, actually.
I like to tell you'd be surprised how much blood you can lose before we get worried.
Really?
Yeah. Actually, yes. Nosebleeds or rectal bleeding. It always looks like it's more when it's on your pillow or in the toilet.
There's definitely a breakdown. So when you have patients, so if you have especially like a guy come in and there's a wound or something, like you'd be like, I lost like pints of blood or whatnot. Usually guys are, when they see a certain quantity of blood, they freak out a lot more. And then you actually use the example of if they're there with somebody who has a menstrual cycle, you're like, that there's a lot of blood that gets lost every month in a menstrual cycle. So you need to just kind of buck up. You have plenty of blood, whereas half the population loses a lot of blood every month. And it takes a lot of blood to be gone before we get worried.
But for guys, it depends on where it comes from, though. It's only if it's from the penis, it's a couple drops in there. It's like, whoa.
No, I remember my cousin used to be an ECW, so I'm a bit of a wrestling fan. But he was telling me how they would like cut their forehead or above the eyebrow to make it look like a lot of blood. Like it bleeds a lot, but it's not gonna do a lot of damage. So
that is a dangerous tangent, and you are dangling fruit that I'm not going to take right now.
No, really, I was going to say, you may not know, but one among us is a huge wrestling fan.
And we were literally just talking about wrestling.
He was a Dudley boy. He was one of the old Dudley boys. Yeah.
No, it's amazing. We need to talk a lot more.
We'll return to wrestling later. Now back to your usual programming. We have trepanning, like trepanning tools and
Oh,
things.
cool!
So, like,
I'm going to see those.
like they look like screws. Like they just screw parts of the brain out. I don't know if they still use that. Do they still use trepanning?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I mean, different. Yeah, so
yes and no.
Yeah, a little bit more precise. No. But now it's like I guess there was a hand crank drill. But you use it specifically for like bleeding on the brain if there's too much pressure. You put in a thing called a bolt. So if you want to monitor brain pressures, you stick a little like a probe down into the brain.
Yeah. It also is if you're way out in the middle of nowhere and a patient has a specific kind of bleeding from an artery inside the brain, it would be a procedure still done to relieve that pressure. And now it's called a burr hole.
You have the fancy tools, because otherwise there are plenty of ER docs in those settings who have had to improvise with things like a drill that we use to put, if we cannot get an IV and somebody is extremely sick, you basically put you drill into one of the big bones, either the humerus or the femur or the tibia.
No, thank you.
And you can go into the bone marrow and you can use that like a big IV.
But usually patients are awake to state their preference. They don't like it.
Yeah, exactly. But if you're in a pinch, you can use that same drill to put a hole through the skull to alleviate pressure. It's just not your first go-to. And you got to be careful how deep you drill.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, lobotomizing
like drywall. Don't let it pop all the way through.
Yeah, right. You want to hit just that inner table. Got to leave that.
We got to talk about the iron lung, because that I've seen it prominently displayed in your videos. It's tell us a little bit about the device. Well, I think we can definitely talk about some of the physiology of it, but why don't you tell us about the one you have and why do we have iron lungs?
Well, I mean, you guys would know better than I would why we actually have them and what they actually do. Our iron lung is from around the 50s. It was during the polio epidemic here in Lancaster, and it's from Lancaster General Hospital. Actually, donated it, from what I understand, long before my time. And it uses negative pressure to help you breathe. Correct? Yes.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely.
Yay.
So yeah, it's like I like to describe it. And the reason what we do typically, when you hear about people on ventilators or breathing tubes, like when you go to get surgery, we call that positive pressure ventilation, because what's happening is you're putting a straw, a big plastic straw basically, down through the windpipe to the lungs, and then a machine is pushing positive pressure air into your lungs. They expand, and then the machine stops doing that, and then your lungs kind of contract, and then that's your breath out. So positive pressure pushes air in straight down your windpipe into your lungs, and then it stops, and then you're able to exhale. But what an iron lung does is it seals the body, leaving the head outside, into in this case, iron, or metal chamber. It's airtight. You got rubber around the neck or some sort of gasket so that air can't really escape. And then the machine, there's a bellows where the inside of this chamber becomes a vacuum, and that causes your chest to rise, and it causes you to breathe in, because of course your head can be out and moving around, and the machine is basically creating a vacuum chamber, so you breathe out, and then once that vacuum chamber stops, your body, your muscles will then contract, and then you breathe and you exhale. And it's physiologically the best artificial ventilation, because when you do positive pressure, you put all this pressure in the lungs, you can pop lungs. It's just not really the way that we breathe. We breathe by flattening our diaphragm, which causes a vacuum in your chest. So that all the iron lung does is take that same process and put it outside the body. And it's it's just extremely similar to how we normally breathe. So it is definitely better. The problem is you have their body in this chamber, you can't get to it. So, I mean, you have to open it up doors and like do your medical stuff or get them out to, kind of help clean and do normal patient care. So it's not good for that. But from a physiology standpoint, it's excellent.
But then they're not breathing when it's opened.
Correct. I didn't say it was convenient, but it's just,
so they do stop breathing. Nature. They stop breathing if it opens. If you're that bad off, I would assume.
I believe so, yeah, if you were too paralyzed, right? Because the mechanism...
My understanding... So, this is reasonable to discuss polio, too, right? It's in the news again, and this was something... My Aaron, have you guys ever seen a case? I've never seen a case.
I knew a
No.
guy that had polio.
Yeah, like back in what kind of time period?
He was probably in his 70s, in the
Yeah.
90s. And so he would, like, when he walked, his knees bent backwards. And he said it was from polio, just degenerative changes. It seemed like everything else was fine.
It's probably
it was from polio.
yeah. I mean, the if you don't mind me talking about it a little bit, but like the polio virus, I mean, the reason you should be pretty scared about it is that it's resurging in terms of it was pretty much almost completely gone, but now they're discovering they had one case up in New York, right?
Yeah.
And this was something that, like, back in the 50s in the heyday, you know, they'd be 350,000 cases. And then I think in the last 10 years, there was like 6 recorded cases. I don't remember if that was worldwide. I mean, it's that rare.
Probably
and the
not
problem
worldwide.
with polio, what's that? It's some really low, but you know, the problem with polio is that 70% of people will be completely asymptomatic. You don't know that you have it. And there's sort of a 30 or 29% that'll have some other symptoms like sore throat, fever, you know, kind of your general flu-y, virusy kind of symptoms. And then 1% of people will get a central nervous system infection. They'll get infection around the brain, so they'll act like they have, or they do have, meningitis. But the scariest is that that 1% can go on to develop, about 1 in 1,000 is of the overall cases will get some sort of paralysis. And that's the child numbers. Adults, about 1 in 75 if chance of having some paralysis. And that paralysis, the virus basically, while it's active, causes inflammation in the nerves, usually the spinal cord and down, and so then you can't walk, or it goes all the way up to your kind of neck nerves, and then your diaphragm doesn't move. And that's why polio can kill people. You just stop breathing because you physically cannot move your diaphragm anymore. And you know, otherwise you can be totally fine, mentally, normally intact. And so the iron lungs came about because of all of these cases, especially children at the time. They were stopping breathing. At first they couldn't walk, and then they couldn't breathe, and so they were fairly desperate to figure out a way to mitigate this. And some people, going back to Mike's story, you can have polio, you can have some of the symptoms, like where you can't walk. Not everybody gets the can't breathe. That's the most severe form. But like my teacher in elementary school, she was unable to walk for several weeks, and then she got better. But what can happen about 40, 50 years later is all those nerves that were affected almost start to wear out. So you'll see these folks that then develop a bunch of muscle wasting and kind of nerve wasting, and you know, many decades after the disease. So simple and preventable with a vaccine.
Well, yeah. We've been working with the Polio Survivors Network to try and get. We don't have a whole lot of items outside of the iron lung. We have a few leg braces, but we've been working with the Polio Survivors Network, and I had a really great conversation with somebody who's going to be donating their leg braces and some other things. And they said that one of the best books, if you want to learn about how polio affects the patients themselves, is to get a book called The Polio Paradox. I'm not sure who wrote it. Richard Bruno is what I wrote down. So he said that, you know, there's so many like personality changes that happen with polio patients because they are basically forced to be type A personalities because they're, you know, handicapped, unfortunately. And he was a fantastic person to speak with, and he doesn't limit himself. I mean, he said he has the limp, but he's still up and going. He works construction. He's a normal member of society.
Yeah, that's it would be terrifying to see polio go through the population in a massive scale again. So
definitely.
Yeah, no thanks.
And I know that they were starting to use the iron lungs for COVID, or maybe I misheard that, but I thought I had heard somewhere that they were trying to find iron lungs when they were running out of ventilators.
I mean, any port in a storm at that point. Yeah, those were scary times. Those are really scary times.
They would have worked. There were some, I think Italy especially pioneered it looked like an external BiPAP. So they had this big old plastic balloon that went over your head, and it would do the same sort of thing with changes in pressure. I remember that early on in the pandemic. Yeah, we were They ran out. That was when Italy ran out. They were like, we don't have any more. So they were, and I think they were pioneering it as less invasive.
Well, back in the 50s, did they not have endotracheal tubes then? Is this like the only way you could ventilate somebody?
No,
I
we
would
have some.
guess that they had.
question.
Yeah, but if you have somebody who's otherwise awake, alert,
you don't want to
you don't want to be on a ventilator with a breathing tube for life if there's an alternative.
And do iron lungs suck farts out of people too?
There he is. There he is. He had been so good for so long.
I think they probably do.
They probably do, right?
Thought,
you think like your
do.
abdomen probably goes along with your chest?
Yeah, because your rectal sphincter is like a gasket, and then the pressure inside your colon would be so much, like it probably built up from the bacterial production of gas, and then as the bellows then contract the diaphragm of the machine, the pressure outside the body would drop, and therefore the pressure gradient across the rectal sphincter would change, and so the high pressure inside would then go outside the sphincter, and the fart would be released into the chamber. And fortunately, because you have the gasket around your head and neck, you probably wouldn't smell it, but it would go out the exhaust port.
If there's an exhaust port. Otherwise, when you open it up to do whatever you need to do, then people are dropping like flies.
Way too long on this.
It'd be hard to keep the vacuum seal.
You just say yes.
The best part is that, Kim, when you walk down the hall and you see the iron lung, that's the only thing you're going to think of.
Oh, I know, right? It's right in our entranceway too, so I'll see it every day. And that's all
You
I'll
are
think
very
about.
welcome.
So thanks, Mike.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Are there one more maybe artifact question? You kind of got to I have a fondness for studying quack medicine, and you did mention the artificial leech, the life awakener, but any other interesting objects you have along those lines?
Oh, we have the old museum had an entire exhibit based on it. It's a lot of medication, like snake oil kind of things. I mean, we have electroshock machines, which we know, at least I believe, they're still in use. I'm not sure, honestly, but we have like from the straight asylum
it's a little
days.
bit,
yeah,
it's different now. Now people are sedated and way out of favor, though. I mean,
can we wear a TENS unit?
No, like ECT.
Oh, you're talking about electroconvulsive therapy for depression?
Yeah, I did a rotation at like a small hospital when I was a med student. It was anesthesia, so we went into PACU. And there were 4 patients lined up, and each of them was getting ECT treatments. And I was like, what in the hell? Like, we still do this?
In med school.
Yeah.
It just seems so brutal.
Some people apparently swear by that. I remember I've taken care of a patient who mentioned to me that they were just waiting for the next treatment because it was always extremely helpful for many months. And it's not like it's not like the movie, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It's not like holding you down with wet sponges.
It used to be
car batteries. I mean, maybe at that time it was, but now it's the sedation and you're asleep. And
they argue that's why Hemingway killed himself, was because of all the treatments that he had awake, and he's like, I couldn't bear to do another treatment.
I'm sure it wasn't the daily use of alcohol or
well, I mean, that could be medicating his mental illness as well.
Yeah, he was a straight alcoholic.
Yeah,
and also possibly a Russian spy. I was listening to a podcast about him today. Cool. Yeah,
and he liked cats.
Hey, it's not all bad then.
Multiple head injuries.
No, I think that's another negative. He liked cats.
We're in a fight now.
Yeah. And he didn't like wrestling. Yeah. He thought wrestling was fake.
Are you trying to trigger me? Are you trying to bait me here?
Get him, Max.
Kim, I'm sorry. We're not trying to air our laundry here on the show with you.
It's all good. But yeah, I mean, a lot of the quack medicine that we have is medications, like fake medications, things that they thought. I mean, back before the FDA and we had the regulations that we have now, I mean, it was pretty much just put a whole bunch of stuff in a bottle and it might work.
That sounds like a Bang energy drink.
Yeah.
The first time I had one of those, I was like, I feel really good. I was giggling my entire shift. I was like, what is in this thing?
I had one. I finally tried one. I'm just a classic kind of coffee guy. But, it's like coffee with cream and sugar, so it might as well be candy. And I think I was working a shift and quite tired. And I'm not a big energy drink guy, but it's like, I'm going to try one of the Bang energy drinks. And at the cafeteria at the hospital, they happen to have they were just had the cotton candy flavor. And it's just like, this can't be good. I'm gonna drink it anyway. And it tasted like science and chemicals, but I was awake. I mean, so it did what it was supposed to do.
Well, I mean, a lot of the old quack medicines were essentially either cocaine or opium, right? I mean, a lot of those, they're like,
and heroin.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, those work.
It was usually stimulants or laxatives is what it usually was. So you were really, really jittery and high, but then you had to go to the bathroom. So, I mean, you take the good with the bad.
At that point, you don't care what you had to begin with, because you're just like, man, now bowels are moving and I'm seeing things. So I guess I'm better. I'm different.
Yeah, I got to go to the bathroom, but that dragon in there is just like not letting me go. But yeah, I mean, that's a lot of what it is. It's a lot of like uppers. And I mean, we don't have the actual drugs, but like we have the bottles. So I don't want people to think we have like drugs.
It's probably safer that.
Yeah.
Where's
the museum located again?
No cocaine.
Are these in cases? Are they accessible?
So Kim, as part of the as we kind of wind down here a little bit, this part of the show, we want to do a bit of a closing segment where we are soliciting some ideas and things like that. So I wanted to ask you, is there sort of a corner of medical history that the Lancaster Museum, the Medical Heritage Museum, would be interested in seeing us cover or helping us cover?
We're going to be doing a bit of research on our own on corpse medicine, which is like this whole subset of medicine where basically cannibalism, that's why mummies are so rare, because the Victorians and down ate them all once they started finding them.
What do they do with the daddies?
Wow.
But I mean, there's more than just that. Like they would save like the fat of a corpse. There's something called a mellified man, which
I want to know more about the mellified man.
The mellified man is essentially, somebody toward the end of their life would be given a diet of just honey, and that's all that they would eat. And it would, to the point of where it's exuding from their skin. And then they would bury them once they finally expired from eating nothing but honey, I guess. But they're also like end of life kind of thing. Like they willingly subject themselves to do this. And they bury them for like 100 years. And then when they dig them back up, they're basically mummified in honey. So it would be a medical health benefit that they would eat this mellified man. And it's just a fascinating thing. And I Max, I think I told you you should watch the British show Horrible Histories, when they talk a lot about medical history. And it's a kid show. I wouldn't say it's for kids, but it's a kid show. But I mean, they cover the mellified man too. So I mean, it's written by historians, I believe, but it's fascinating.
Who's the first person who's like, I got an idea? Bob, you've had a good life. I want to try something. Hear me out on this. I want you to eat this honey, and that's all you're going to eat. I mean, it's sweet. It's going to be, at least, I'm sure you get sick of honey when you eat enough of it, but to the point that I think I can get it to come out of your pores. And I mean, no amount of water, showering, it's just, you're always going to be covered in honey. You're just sticky. It's everywhere. And when you die, I'm thinking we put you in the ground for 100 plus years. We see kind of where we end up at the end of that. You down, and that guy was like, yeah, sounds reasonable.
It's like 3 generations at that time. They really had to think forward. They're like, all right,
you'd think it's like
my grandsons will dig this person up, and
if they remember
I think
where
they also
was.
buried them in honey. But I mean, honey is it's a natural preservative, isn't it? I mean,
right?
It is,
and it's antiseptic as well.
Yeah, it's actually pretty cool the way the antisepsis works on it, if I remember it correctly. It's because the honey is so dense and concentrated with sugar that bacteria have a difficult time existing on it, because it sucks the water and or stuff out of their like cell, their cytoplasm or whatever. So it's not I don't believe it's actually a chemical in the honey. I think it's so osmotically powerful that it just desiccates bacteria. And it definitely is used, quote, sterile honey is used in some wound care applications. I know that for a fact.
Is that where the term the bee's knees came from? So if you eat like a mellified man's knees, you get well. No.
I think so.
Who knows where that came from?
That was a stretch. I was worried where you were going to go with it, and then it ended up very G-rated.
Yeah, it was fine. I've been doing a lot of dad jokes lately.
That's what happens.
So we did cover corpse medicine. I'm just trying to find.
Yes, we did. I did want to point that out.
We
did
missed the mellified man,
there you
though.
go.
I'm kind of sad.
Yeah, but Mike wrote that episode, and he did not talk about the mellified man.
Well, it was in my notes. Yeah, episode 20. It was in my notes.
No, maybe I just.
But I must not have. Yeah. Thanks for not listening, Aaron. That's great. So we did
a sticky subject. We should move on.
Oh, nice.
But
thank you for that. Well, let's kind of end up with telling our listeners sort of how can they support the museum besides like going there. Is there other ways they can be involved with the museum? Other kind of programs that you guys have that you would want us to direct folks to?
Well, I mean, our website is probably the best place to go for programs that we're doing. We do a monthly webinar series that is open to everybody. So anybody out there listening can come and listen. And the price is just pay what you wish donation, as low as $1. It's just to support the museum. So we post them all on our website, any event we have. But other than that, I think, our social medias right now have been the main place to.
They've been fire?
Yeah. Well, our TikTok has our follow us on Instagram, follow us on Facebook. It's LMH_museum on Instagram and just Lancaster Medical Museum on Facebook.
Mm-hmm. And I got in touch with him because when we started our TikTok account, and I was kind of looking for inspiration. I said, I don't know what I'm doing. Let me look. And so I put in medical history, and your video was the first thing that popped up, and I've been following ever since.
Yes.
You put out like 8 videos a day. I don't know how you do it.
We have a lot of drafts, and we'll just take days and just like afternoons if we're a little slow. Of course, that hasn't happened recently, but if we're a little slow, we'll just take an afternoon and film a bunch of stuff. So that's how we do it.
All right. With that, we will leave it there. Really appreciate you being on, Kim.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And we will be posting everything, so we'll let all of our listeners know, hey, let's go to the website. We're going to have all the links. We will and I'll tell you what, I'll keep hassling you on social media if you don't mind, because it's a lot of fun.
Please do. I would like to stay involved if I can.
The feeling is mutual, and we'll count on it at this point.
We can talk about wrestling.
No.
We appreciate everyone listening, and we'd love to hear from all of you out there. If you'd like to send us a message or provide feedback, we can be reached through our website, www.poorhistorianspod.com. There you will find links to all of our social media sites. We take emails at poorhistorianspod@gmail.com, and we work to respond to all posts on our various social media accounts. If you have time, please go and leave us a nice 5-star review on iTunes or on whichever platform you choose, and consider posting about the show on your social media. And if you do that, hey, feel free to tag us. Every single one of those things does help raise the show's profile, and we always appreciate when they happen. If you'd like to support the show in other ways, check out the Poor Historians merchandise, including t-shirts and mugs, by going over to our website and following the links. And with all that, this is Dr. Max with the Poor Historians Podcast, signing out. AMA. This will probably go into an outtakes, but you had mentioned on one, I said something on one of your TikTok videos, and I had my AEW shirt on.
Oh,
and
yeah.
You mentioned cool shirt, and I was like, oh, I think Kim has a title wrestling or is a wrestling fan.
Oh, I'm a huge Jon Moxley fan. Even when he was in WWE. I know this is like going to be.
Oh, it'll go toward. No, we're going to put this in at the very end. Don't worry.
Oh yeah, when he was in CZW and was working with I think I was in Philly with CZW. So yeah,
it sounds.
I was always a big Jon Moxley fan, and I know he's still going. He's not in WWE.
Oh yeah, he's
champion. I think.
AEW champ right now. Yeah, he's AEW champ.
Oh, our bell's going. I apologize.
No, that's absolutely fine. So this is now a wrestling podcast. Just so
cool.
You guys know. Let's talk about more. I mean, there's bloodletting, there's blading, there's all sorts of stuff. But
he looks scary.
Yeah, we have
Robin
Japan.
But yeah, CZW. That's a you
callback.
Well, not only that, they're still around, aren't they?
CZW is still
smaller.
around, as far as I know.
I think it's Combat Zone Wrestling, and if you want to see
Yeah.
a literal bloodbath, like barbed wire matches, fluorescent light tubes getting broken over people, I think is that
Like,
is
it's
it?
like
It's either
straight
that or
backyard,
GCW that like
like-
Nick Gage almost died in the ring when they lacerated his carotid artery.
I believe it.
He didn't though.
Is there a character then in that wrestling show that has like medical acumen and takes one of these scarifiers or bloodlets?
There
and he's
should
like,
be.
yeah.
There was a
That'd be a good
dentist.
crossover.
Wasn't there a dentist?
Yeah, Dr. Isaac Yankum, who later
Isaac
became
Yankum,
Kane.
DDS, was Kane. No, it wasn't Kane. It was Kane. It was Kane. Yeah, he was a dentist.
I think he was.
Yeah, and then he
Aaron,
came
you're
out
our
as the
fact
Kane
checker.
character.
Dr. Isaac Yankum.
Dr. Isaac Yankum. All right, I found John
DDS.
Moxley. So Dr. Isaac.
Yeah.
Oh, we could
it was
talk about
Kane.
wrestling. Let me tell you.
Yeah, let's just talk about wrestling.
But no, going back to the medical stuff. We
Okay,
do
we'll
have.
return to the medical stuff.
We'll return to wrestling later. Now back to your usual programming.
I found Isaac Yankum. He's
Am I right?
His
He's
real
Kane.
name is
It's
yeah
Kane.
yeah. Then he was Kane after that. Yeah,
Yeah.
correct. Yeah.
Yeah,
So he
came from
morphed into
obscurity.
Kane. You want to know what he's
He's a
doing right
mayor.
now?
He's a
He's
mayor
a
of
mayor
in
now.
Ohio, right?
Yeah, he's Tennessee, which is
Tennessee.
even better.
Yeah,
Knox County, Tennessee. He's
Yeah.
the mayor.
He's made no
Yeah.
controversial statements ever in his 10 years as a politician either.
I'm sure he never has. No. Yeah. Well, he's not the first one, right? I mean, Jesse Ventura was the mayor of Minnesota. No,
Jesse
the
the
governor
Body
of Minnesota,
Ventura.
right?
Yeah, governor. Well,
Yeah,
no.
but how cool would it be if you were like, "Yo, Hellfire and Brimstone is our mayor"? Like, that would be awesome.
That'd be cool.
I would have utmost respect if he did it in character. That, I mean, if you went to a podium and you gave, because Kane also is not known for speaking a lot. He just sort of is a menacing
Yeah.
presence. So if
kinda
you
like
had a
Brock
city
Lesnar.
council meeting where he just sort of like the lights go down and then on the corners of the giant table, there's like fire that comes up and he just walks up with his Kane music to the podium and just silently stares at everybody. And that would be, I mean, it'd probably be the most productive public council meeting I could imagine. And it would be something where people would actually tune in and pay attention to that.
I would watch the hell out of that.